Hello, everyone. It's day 4 of the Renew Your Energy Challenge, and I'm super excited to be talking about supporting digestion and gut health today. Today's a very important topic. Yesterday, Kim covered balancing your blood sugar and how that impacts your energy, and today we're going to be talking about how your digestion and supporting that and your gut health as well can all have an impact on your energy, and the exercise will help you learn how to optimize this. So the goal of today is to really teach you what good digestion is, how you can support your digestion on a regular basis really easily, like at every meal. And it's not going to cost you any money. It's just going to take about 90 seconds of your time. So I'm going to go through that exercise. But to get started, I just want to talk about the state that your body has to be in. Like if you're in the workbook, which I believe it's page 9 is day 4. We talk about the parasympathetic state and why that's optimal for digestion. So I want to start with that. So our body has 2 states really. It has like a stressed out state, which we call a sympathetic state, and it has a relaxed state, which is the parasympathetic state. Digestion thrives and happens properly in the parasympathetic or relaxed state. We need to be in that state in order for everything to work properly. When our bodies are stressed out, that means that we aren't digesting and breaking down and absorbing our food properly. And this is where our energy comes in and just how we feel in general. So when we're not digesting and absorbing our food properly, even though you may not realize that you're stressed out, that means that that can lead to things like nutrient deficiencies, which can have a huge impact on your energy, but it can also lead to a lot of other things. Like headaches are very commonly caused by nutrient deficiencies. Same thing with migraines. Different like hormonal symptoms or hormonal imbalances, those can also be caused by nutrient deficiencies. So that's why we're talking about digestion and gut health today, because it does play such a huge role in your energy. We're also going to dive into the gut barrier a little bit, because that's what the bonus in the workbook focuses on. But we're going to start with actual digestion, how it works, and how you can optimize it. So we have to be in that relaxed state, right? This means that we need to slow down and not be super distracted while we're eating. And that's what we focus on for the exercise. It's not always easy to get into this state. Like it's easy in theory, but when life is happening around you super quickly, we totally understand that you're not going to be able to apply this all the time. But we just want to have you start thinking about it. So when we're in that parasympathetic state, digestion is working properly. What does this mean? This means that we are relaxed. So a lot of people say digestion starts in the mouth. My husband's sneezing. This is ridiculous. I hope no one heard that. So digestion, actually, we feel that it starts in your mind. Like before you even sit down to eat your meal. Are you stressed out? What are you thinking about when you sit down to eat? Are you doing a million different things? Are you on your phone? Are you super distracted? So we really feel that digestion actually starts in your mind before you even sit down to eat your meal. So you want to try to be relaxed. But the second important thing is actually chewing your food. So I think that it's pretty common for most people to focus on digestion as like occurring inside of your gut, but it actually starts in your brain and then moves to your mouth when you start chewing. So when we are eating our food, we actually make enzymes in our saliva. So if you don't chew your food enough, you don't start breaking it down. So you're mechanically breaking it down because you're chewing it, but you're also should be breaking it down with a certain enzyme that's going to help make it easier once it travels down to your stomach and your small intestine. So thinking about chewing your food more, it's really hard to do that when you're distracted. So because you just aren't really thinking about it, and then you don't even know, it's like, did I chew my food? Or you forget that you even ate your meal. So focusing on chewing your food more, 20 to 30 times, it can be really tedious to count these things, but even just doing it once makes you realize that like, ooh, I definitely don't chew enough. And then from there, it's going to move down your esophagus to your stomach. And then another piece of proper digestion in the relaxed state is producing enough stomach acid so that it can start to break down the proteins and the foods that you're eating. And then it's going to move to your small intestine. And this is where pretty much all of the absorption occurs for food and water. And your pancreas actually makes certain enzymes that get released into there. And that helps you actually break down the protein, fat, and carbs in your meal. So why is breaking these down so important? Because we can't absorb them in their whole state. We have to break down the food in order to absorb it properly. And then we can use it properly in our bodies for different processes. If we're like deficient in certain areas, you're going to pull nutrients from what you're absorbing. Even just for metabolism, for us to function, sit and breathe, we need these nutrients. So if you're not, these are some of the things that can kind of come up when you're eating in a stress state. You probably aren't chewing your food enough. You definitely aren't making enough stomach acid or secreting enough digestive enzymes to actually break down the food, which is why it's so hard to absorb in the first place. So hopefully when you're in that relaxed state, you can chew your food enough, get it to the stomach, break it down, and then make enough enzymes. And we're going to talk about that a little bit too, so that you can actually break it down and then make it easy for your body to absorb the food. So from there, we're doing most of the absorption in the small intestine. And then another big thing that can kind of come up when you're not in a relaxed state for eating is that you have to actually like move the food and move whatever's in your intestines like through, and that's called peristalsis. When your intestines are moving, when we're stressed, like we just shut all that stuff off. Like anything that's not essential is going to be turned off. So things like digestion, that's not completely essential, like your reproductive organs, all those sorts of things, like they just get turned off. And that's why like stress is a major contributor to things like constipation, because your intestines can't move things properly. So you can't digest your food properly, you can't move things through, and that can lead to nutrient deficiencies, but also constipation and things like that, or even just indigestion or bloating, because your body's trying to deal with this like half broken down food. So keeping that in mind. And that's really why we wanted to address this digestion as far as like energy goes. So if you deal with a lot of fatigue or just like energy dips, like Kim talked about blood sugar yesterday, and that's definitely a major contributor, but like overall fatigue and always being tired, like you likely are deficient in some nutrients or aren't breaking down or digesting your food enough to get those and to feel good and have energy. So that's like a main reason. And I want to kind of go over those two systems a little bit more. So in the beginning, I talked about how we have our sympathetic and our parasympathetic state, and how the parasympathetic is relaxed. That's when we digest. That's because this is our anabolic state. We're building things up. When we're in our stressed out sympathetic state, this is catabolic. So this is when we break things down. And that's what we're going to talk about more tomorrow when we go into stress and how that impacts your energy and just like your overall health in general. So thinking, okay, if you're stressed out, you're breaking things down in your body, you can't absorb food and build things up. And then when you're relaxed, that's when you can build things up. It's when you can thrive and kind of get all those nutrients that you need. Hey, Deborah, a little late to the party. No, you're just on time. You can always watch the beginning later. So I'm going to go through the exercise now, because after that, I'm going to kind of switch gears and talk about the bonus information that's in the workbook. So if you look on page 9, we have the exercise laid out. And the goal of this exercise is to get you in that relaxed state at your meals. And it takes you I'm pretty sure it only takes 90 seconds. So we do have some tips on things to do kind of before you sit down at your meal, but you might do some of these things like make your plate and sit down to eat. Don't eat standing, don't eat while you're cooking. I'm guilty of that one. Try to put the laptop and your cell phone away. And we understand like you don't have to turn things off, but like don't be sitting in front of your laptop or like on your phone. Because like I said in the beginning, like if you're on your phone or if you're typing an email or responding to an email or something on your computer while you're trying to eat your lunch or breakfast or dinner or something like that, then you're probably not going to be chewing enough, and you could get something that like stresses you out, and then it's going to pull you out of that relaxed state where you can digest your food properly. So making sure that you make your plate, sit down to eat, remove all your distractions, even like TV and stuff like that. We do think it's very beneficial like to be with another person and actually like have conversation, because I think that can be really relaxing. So it's not like you have to be like isolated by yourself at every single meal and you can't like communicate or like socialize. Like definitely socialize. I think that brings a lot of like relaxation to the atmosphere, but make sure you're not on your phone doing all those things that we typically do at most of our meals. So all you're going to do is you're going to close your eyes. And you can do this now if you want to practice. You're going to close your eyes and you're going to take a deep breath through your nose and smell your food. A lot of people don't even think to smell the food that they're about to eat and really like try to enjoy it and take it in. And it's because that's going to help stimulate, you know, all your digestive system and let your body know that like we're getting ready to eat. So you need to get ready to do all the things that we kind of talked about at the beginning of the video. So take a deep breath through your nose. You're going to smell your food. And then you're going to exhale through your mouth slowly for 8 seconds. And that's really important because when we do that slow exhale, our body starts to relax. You know, your shoulders are probably up here. They're going to start to roll down your back. And then you're just going to do this 2 more times. So like taking a deep breath in. And so try not to like scrunch up with your shoulders, but like extend your belly. So deep breath in through your belly, and then you're going to breathe out for 8 seconds, 2 to 3 times before you eat your meal. And this is the quickest way to get into a relaxed state, just by breathing. That's why like meditation and mindfulness, all those things are so popular right now, because we're all so stressed out. It's the world that we live in. There's a lot of amazing things about the world we live in, but there's also a lot of things like the high stress and the constant stimulation that can really deter our health and make it hard when we're trying to feel good, have energy, and work towards different health goals. So that's the exercise for today. Post in the group. Let us know if you did it and how you felt. Like, were you able to relax? What meal did you do it at? You know, I highly recommend choosing whatever meal you feel the most distracted at. Like, I think for me, it's like lunch, because I want to work through my lunch because I've got things to do and I want to finish working so that I can get on with the rest of my life, right? But pick a meal, do this exercise, share how you feel like, if you feel like it helped you at all, if it was hard, like what was hard about it? Was it hard to not be on your phone or to not do work? I know a lot of you have a very short time to eat your food. I have a lot of friends that are nurses and work in that like really fast-paced setting where sometimes you don't even get a break to eat. But even if you only have 5 or 10 minutes, this only takes like less than a minute, like maybe 90 seconds tops, to like sit down, smell your food, take the deep breaths, relax, count for 8, slow deep breath out before you eat your food. But this is priceless. This is something that you can start doing immediately that's going to help you start to break down your food and digest everything better so that you're absorbing more nutrients. This is a great way to improve your energy and just like overall happiness and satisfaction with the food that you're eating. So if we're like rushed, we're not really chewing, that's when you start to get bloated, indigestion, all those annoying symptoms. Whereas if we just take a little bit to relax, you're going to remember that you ate your meal. You get to smell it, enjoy it a little bit more, taste it more, and digest it better. So that's the first part and the main focus for today. And how digestion impacts our energy overall is making sure you're taking the time to slow down, relax at meals so that you can absorb nutrients. Now I want to go to the bonus section. So we have a little on page 9, it's got bonus tips. So we wrote a list of some of our favorite gut supportive foods and other foods that can also like boost digestion. So you always have to be in that relaxed state. It's not going to go away. Your body's not going to function properly unless it's in that parasympathetic state. But there's a lot of other foods that you can include on a regular basis that can help improve the health of your overall gut. So now I want to talk more about our actual gut lining and why that's so important for our energy and just overall how we feel. So I'm going to try to, I hope it lets me post this picture in the comments now so that you can see it. Oh, it's not going to let me attach it in the comments. I might send it to Kim and have her post it. So I want to talk about our gut barrier and which is just your intestinal lining. I just sent it to Kim, so she'll post the picture hopefully. So our gut lining is so important because it does a lot of different things inside our bodies. So it's an actual physical barrier. So it's just our intestinal barrier. So like, let's think about our small intestine. Our small intestine is like right below your stomach. It has, our whole gut has like a thin lining, and that's what's protected inside your gut from what's outside in the rest of your body. So as you can imagine, when we're digesting and breaking down food, and we have different bacteria inside of our gut, those are all going to impact, like they create toxins and different things. They're giving off different things that we don't necessarily want in the rest of our body. So having a really healthy intestinal barrier or gut lining is very important. And Kim's going to hopefully post this picture of what a healthy versus a leaky gut lining looks like, just so you can have a visual, like as I'm talking about this. But yeah, so that gut barrier, it's a physical barrier that's protecting what's inside your gut from the outside, but it's also where the absorption from what we're eating goes into the rest of your body. So that barrier is where we have different microvilli and these little kind of finger-like projections. Oh, she can't post a picture as a comment, but she's going to post it in the group. Okay. So it's hard with Facebook Live. You can't like share your screen unless you take your face off. So she'll post that in the group and you can refer to it there, but I won't refer to the picture that much. But we have this intestinal barrier that's super important, and that's like where we have those bonus tips, those foods. Those foods are particularly good for your intestinal barrier and keeping it healthy and making it so that harmful bacteria and pathogens aren't getting in, and food particles that are too big aren't getting out because it's very healthy. The cells are tight and really close to each other, so nothing's kind of like leaky or getting through, which I'm sure some of you have heard of leaky gut before. And that's just when the cells that make up that lining of your intestinal barrier, they start to move apart. I don't have a hard copy of the picture. Sorry, Arlene, that's a really good idea though. But I won't refer to it that much, so we can just kind of forget that. So thanks, that was a good suggestion. So your intestinal barrier, it's made up of different cells. They can move, and they have these tight junctions that can move and become leaky, and then that can lead to a lot of issues with like get certain bad bacteria getting into the digestive system, or food particles getting out of the digestive system, and then that can cause like food sensitivities and allergies and things like that. So we want this intestinal barrier to be very strong, to be able to absorb the food properly and get the nutrients into our bloodstream, but we also want it to keep things out. And that's like the two main ways that it functions in your body. There's a lot of different things that can impact this intestinal barrier, and a lot of them, they're pretty common. So you might hear these and be like, oh my God, I do like the majority of these, but it's okay. It's the world we live in. There's a lot of things you can do to make sure that your intestinal barrier is healthy. So that's kind of like what we're referring to when we talk about gut health. Like we want it to be functioning properly and digestion to go well, but we also want that intestinal barrier to be strong. So different stressors that can impact this barrier are things like the foods that you're eating. So if you're eating a lot of inflammatory foods, then these can make it so that those cells that have those tight junctions that are really tightly packed together and aren't letting things get through become looser, and there's more inflammation there. So inflammatory foods, Kim talked about this a lot on Monday, on day 1 with food quality. So things like gluten, dairy, soy, artificial sweeteners or ingredients, and really processed oils like vegetable, canola, soybean oil, those types of things, and alcohol. Those can all be really inflammatory and make it so that that intestinal barrier isn't as strong, especially if we're doing these things all the time. If you eat really well for the most part, like it's not like you can never have any of these things, and like otherwise you won't have a healthy intestinal barrier. It's more of like stress, your overall lifestyle, that type of thing. Another thing is if you have food sensitivities and you're eating those foods, that can cause some leaky gut issues and like moving apart of those cells. If you have a lot of toxic exposure, depending on like what your job is, if you have any infections, so if you get a bacterial infection or a parasite or virus, or if you have an overgrowth of yeast, that can also cause that inflammation and irritation in that barrier. And something that I think a lot of people don't realize is medications, like prescription medications. These can also cause inflammation and kind of weaken the bonds and strength in that intestinal barrier. So even things like, ibuprofen, over-the-counter things, that can also weaken that. So if you're kind of taking stuff like that all the time, you really want to make sure that you're supporting your gut with some of the foods that we listed under the bonus tips, which I'll go through. A big one that has a huge role is emotional stress. So we might not think, like you might think it mostly impacts your mood and maybe your sleep, things like that, but it also has a huge impact on that intestinal barrier and and even the bacteria in your gut. So that's like another big motivator for reducing your stress, which we're going to talk about tomorrow. Or things like not having enough stomach acid or not breaking down your food properly. Those also play a really big role in that intestinal barrier health. And a lot of this is really just contributing to inflammation, and that just causes a malfunction in that intestinal barrier. So like I said, this barrier keeps things inside your gut that are supposed to stay in, and it keeps things outside your gut outside. So it protects from like pathogens, bacteria, toxins, things like that. And it also helps you absorb nutrients from your food. So if we have a lot of inflammation, then that's when a lot of different things can kind of malfunction and go wrong, where we don't absorb our food correctly. So it can lead to nutrient deficiencies. And a lot of that's going to be coming from if you're not digesting and breaking it down well. And then it can also be just overall like energy. Like if you have inflammation in that intestinal barrier, then that can lead to a lot of different like hormonal energy issues, symptoms like that. So how can we support this gut lining? And a lot of it is things that we've already talked about. So Kim talked about it on day 1, food quality. That is huge. If you are avoiding a lot of those inflammatory foods, like if you have a lot of these symptoms like fatigue, maybe some bloating, different like anxiety, mood swings, anything pretty much we listed, like really a lot of things lead back to the gut. Like if you have issues with weight loss, like you just hit a plateau and you can't meet it, headaches, migraines, all those types of things, then we highly recommend trying to support your gut as much as possible and eliminating a lot of those inflammatory foods that we talked about on day 1. If you've never done a 30-day elimination before, we highly recommend it. It can really just give your gut that time and space to heal and learn how to function and digest your food properly. We also recommend adding in gut supportive foods. So in your workbook, we have a list of specific foods that we feel are really supportive for that intestinal barrier, and just even supporting the bacteria that are in your gut. That's also a big role. If you have an imbalance of bacteria, it can lead to different toxins being given off, and then that can cause inflammation in the intestinal barrier too. So some of the foods that are very supportive for your gut lining are things like bone broth. That's a huge one. The collagen in there. We talked about the collagen peptides the other day. A lot of people were posting about that, which was great. That's also super supportive for that gut lining. Aloe vera juice, or just like, even if you have the plant, if you happen to have the plant laying around in your house, then you could also just take the gel from inside. That is really, really healing. It's also really good for detoxification. Ginger, peppermint, those are very soothing and healing to that gut lining. And then we have some foods in here that are more beneficial for the bacteria in your gut, which are things like raw apple cider vinegar, beet kvass, and kimchi, sauerkraut, stuff like that. Those are going to have probiotics in them, which are the good bacteria. And adding these in can help keep a good balance in your gut. So we're always going to have good and bad bacteria, but using probiotics can help create more of a healthier balance in your gut, which is, I'll talk about next. It's pretty easy to disturb that gut microbiome, which is just the bacteria that makes up your gut. So take a look at the workbook on page 9. Consider adding some of these in if you don't already use them. Especially if you're having any of those symptoms that we talked about, these can really help in healing your gut and helping you digest your food better and have a healthier gut lining. So the third aspect of your gut, we talked about like digestion, relaxing at your meals. We talked about the intestinal barrier, which is that lining that lines your whole digestive tract, which is where we absorb our nutrients, but we also keep things out of our digestive system. And then we also have, Deborah, I'll answer your question at the end about the probiotic. So we also have our gut microbiome, which is the bacteria that makes up our gut. We have good and bad bacteria. It's a really important aspect of health that is getting a lot more attention now. Like you'll hear, I feel like I read a lot more about it in like the news, and even like my mom will ask me questions about gut bacteria and stuff, which is really neat. So it's an area of science that we're learning a ton about right now. We've learned how essential it is and how almost kind of like fragile our gut bacteria can be. They're resilient. So if we do something like drinking alcohol, within 30 minutes, that can impact your gut bacteria and create an imbalance. But we can also fix that imbalance within the next 60 minutes. So it's kind of like back and forth, but you want to make sure that you know what creates imbalances in your gut bacteria and like how you can correct those. Otherwise, you can have like different symptoms like an overgrowth of a bad bacteria or yeast, and that is definitely not something you want to have. That can play a huge role in your energy and overall fatigue. So you want to have a diverse population of bacteria in your gut. And you can do this just by the foods that you're eating. So by eating a lot of those nourishing foods that we talked about on day 1, we have that little list in your workbook. Those contribute to good gut bacteria, like lots of vegetables, because those have the prebiotics that feed the good bacteria. So if you're eating a lot of processed foods, a lot of sugar, that's going to impact what type of bacteria you have in your gut, because whatever you're eating, that's what is feeding the bacteria. It's also really important for overall mood and anxiety and things like that. Like if you deal with anything like that, I highly recommend eliminating those inflammatory foods we talked about and adding in these gut supportive foods, because 90% of the serotonin, which is a happiness hormone, that is made in your gut. If you have issues sleeping, support your gut, because 80% of your melatonin is produced in your gut by your gut bacteria. So this is why we want to have the right bacteria in the right balance, and eating our foods in a relaxed environment, just because we're supporting all these different things. So some things you might want to avoid if you are trying to create a really healthy gut microbiome is those inflammatory foods, excessive amounts of sugar, because that can feed yeast and pathogenic bacteria, which can be harmful and just cause like an infection and a lot of different symptoms that are not going to contribute to your energy. You also want to limit alcohol if possible, and making sure you're getting enough sleep, because that can cause a shift as well. But adding in those fermented foods, those are going to be healthy and good probiotics and bacteria and are going to be super beneficial. And then adding in those other things like bone broth, collagen, egg yolks, coconut oil, these things are very helpful for your intestinal barrier lining and keeping that really strong. So to kind of summarize everything, the health of your intestinal barrier impacts the rest of your health. So it does this in a few ways. It's absorbing nutrients. So if we're not absorbing those nutrients because our intestinal barrier isn't healthy, we're going to have overall fatigue and dips in energy and headaches and migraines and things like that. Your small intestine is where the majority of your digestion absorption occurs. So we want to make sure that when we're sitting down to eat at meals, we're relaxing, doing that deep breathing exercise so that we can secrete the enzymes that our small intestine needs to break down our food. And then your gut microbiome is where your gut bacteria live, but it also impacts your overall hormonal health and how you digest your food, your mood, all those things. And all of these areas, probably the most important summarizing point is that all of these areas can be impacted by diet, sleep, stress, medications, so many things that we encounter on a regular basis in our day-to-day lives. So making sure, like, even if you don't have gut symptoms, like if you don't have bloating, constipation, like you use the bathroom regularly, you feel good, it doesn't mean that you don't have kind of underlying things going on in your gut. There's plenty of symptoms that aren't related to those that kind of point to your gut. So like mood, anxiety, a lot of those things. I always make sure that I have people kind of take a look at the foods that they're eating, the amounts for blood sugar, but also what are you doing to support your gut, and what are you doing that could be putting a lot of stress on your gut. So if you implement the exercise that I went over earlier, which is in your workbook on page 9, which is just that deep breathing, relaxing exercise at your meals, that's going to help you digest your food properly. And then if you're doing things like maybe adding in some bone broth or collagen or egg yolks, coconut oil, and those fermented foods, then those are really going to help support your intestinal barrier and your gut bacteria so that everything you can actually digest, absorb things properly, and it really just promotes overall gut health and then your overall well-being, and those can improve your energy. So if you haven't looked at this area before, we highly recommend focusing on it. It's something that, the majority of your immune system lives in your gut, so you can get so many other benefits of doing this as well outside of just improved energy. So we highly recommend taking a look if you haven't. Deborah asked a question about if you take a good probiotic, should you still add the other foods? And I would definitely say yes, and I'm sure Kim would agree with me. One of the cool things about fermented foods, I think she was talking about the fermented foods. Fermented foods not only have the good bacteria, but they're often made up of things like cabbage, and like I know my sauerkraut, I put like onions, cabbage, stuff like that in there. And those are also prebiotics. So they feed the good bacteria. So no matter how many probiotics you take, or like fermented foods that you're eating, you have to eat enough vegetables. And like things like chia seeds, flax seeds, they have like inulin and other types of fiber those feed the good bacteria, and those are going to help them thrive. So I would always recommend making sure that you would include fermented foods as well as a probiotic. It also really depends on like why you're taking the probiotic. I'm glad that helped, Deborah. So thinking about that as well, if you were going to choose one over the other, I would say do fermented foods because you're going to get the prebiotics and the probiotics. But yeah, so those can help. Okay, so make sure you post and comment on this video. Let us know, did you do the exercise? How did it go? Did you notice anything different? And like what was challenging for you? You can kind of, yes, Kim, and for diversity of strains. Yes, so like I mentioned before, a diverse gut is definitely a healthy gut, like Kim just commented. You want to make sure that you have a variety of bacteria because they all do different things, right? You don't want to have too much of any one. So probiotics are great, fermented foods are great, super important. So let us know how the exercise went. We're going to do it as well. It's something that I have to remind myself of a lot. I'm sure Kim does too, as we're always rushing through the day. So slow down, do the exercise, let us know how it went. And if you have any questions, if you're watching this video later and you have questions about anything we talked about, don't hesitate to comment on here. We are in here all day answering questions. And we're going to go choose the day 3 winner. So we'll announce that a bit in the group as well. All right. Talk to you ladies later.